Hello, and welcome to the Perfect Franchise Podcast.
I'm Kris, and joining me is my wonderful co-host, Andrea.
In this podcast, we're on a mission to help you discover all that franchising has to offer.
We'll explore expert strategies, interview successful franchise owners, and give you the tools to make informed decisions.
So whether you're considering your options or you're ready to take that plunge, we're here to support you every step of the way.
So let's jump into today's episode.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the TPF podcast. I'm Kris. I'm with my partner, Andrea. And today we're super excited to have the guys from PatchMaster. We've got Paul Ferrara, President and CEO. We also have Kris Longmore, Director of Franchise Development. Gentlemen, welcome to the podcast.
Good morning, and thank you for having us.
Yeah, good morning. Excited to be here with TPF.
Yeah, and I think we should add that Kris is also an owner of a PatchMaster, so we can really grill him a little bit on that as well. So that'll be exciting. But Paul, start us out with the basics. Tell us a little bit about what exactly does PatchMaster do? How did you come up with this concept? How was it started?
Yeah, and I appreciate it. So what we do is drywall repair. I mean, at the very core and the basics of our operation, but that just almost like a Trojan horse in a lot of ways, because a lot of our franchisees perform more than just drywall repair. We do a lot of things that are drywall adjacent, as we refer to. So anything that's involved in repairing a wall. So you would think about at the very basic, 100% of every drywall repair requires paint. So we're also into painting. And a lot of homes, particularly down there in Florida where you are, Andrea, they love texture. So everything is textured, even the floors. So they also require a lot of texturing. So those are our core. But then when you start going start peeling that onion back, you'll find a lot of franchisees are working and doing the trim, the molding, doing floor replacement, insulation. Again, some light drywall, some light construction work. Sometimes we have franchisees in North Carolina that are doing bathroom remodels. So really it's boiled down to the capabilities and the skill set of the technicians at the local franchise level. And then the second part of your question is how we got started is that Charlotte location I told you about told us about an opportunity to acquire a franchisor in this space, in the drywall repair space. And we met with the owners, and we were absolutely enamored by the space that drywall repair. We thought it was a very niche market, very compelling, really easy to do, low cost, high profit, everything we loved about it. But we weren't necessarily thrilled with the ownership there. And so we decided that we were going to create our own. So we did a pilot out in Utah, in Salt Lake City, Utah, for about, I think it was about 2 years that we did the pilot so that would be our alpha. And then we had a sister company at that time called HouseMaster, which is a home inspection franchise. So then we opened it up to our HouseMaster franchisees, to a select group. So that would be our beta. And so we developed all of our best practices, put a lot of things that we found in Utah into practice around the country to make sure it wasn't, understanding the market dynamics in different regions. And then in 2019 is really when we decided we're going full bore. And that's when we hired Kris, who's our first full-time employee. And then we hired another gentleman named Joe, who is our operations. And it's really been taking off from there. So that was pretty much our origin story from there. And then we sold our sister company to Neighborly in 2020. And then we just took off from there. We were carved out from the deal intentionally. And that's when I became president. And just really with that, since just having to focus on PatchMaster, we just saw nothing but hockey stick growth since then, because there's no more divided loyalty. So we can dedicate 100% of our time in growing the brand. And so really just haven't looked back since 2019, just been, up and to the right.
Paul, I got to ask you,
Yes.
You use the term, you are enamored by the drywall opportunity.
Right? I know.
So, and I'm being a little funny here, but, talk to me about that. Break that down, because, a lot of times I think people think drywall, they think drywall, it's the big deal. Yet you are saying nothing but opportunity. Explain that.
So I'm glad you pointed out. I mean, I do say all the time, there's nothing exciting about drywall. It's just not exciting work, right? But at the end of the day, it's ubiquitous. I'm going to ask you a question, Kris. Is there more wood or drywall inside your home?
I'm sure there's more drywall. Yeah.
Actually, we believe it's wood. But the fact that we think along those lines, it's all the surface areas that you see. So drywall is everywhere on the walls, the ceiling. It's just ubiquitous, and there's nothing coming down the pike that's going to disrupt the market. There's nothing that AI can disrupt. We don't see anything in changes to the way that homes are being built. I don't see anything in the technology to replace drywall. And the other thing about drywall is forever getting damaged through movers or plumbers and electricians. And so when they're coming in and accessing the things that need repair behind the wall, who are they going to call for that? And a lot of times it's just the handyman, the chuck in the trucks, and anyone can fill, can patch a hole, but to make it truly disappear almost becomes an art form. And that's really what separates the men from the boys, as it were. That was what I see as being really, as far as opportunistic, because it's ongoing. I also love the business model too, because it's very inexpensive to get in, low cost, high margin type business and repeatable business. And we hitch if we align ourselves with the referral partners that are constantly doing damage to the walls, like the plumbers, the electricians, and anyone who's in the attic for step throughs, the more longevity our business has on that. So really, again, drywall is boring, but I love the business. I love the space.
Yep. Oh, great.
It's also tariff proof. Drywall is produced in Charlotte and Chicago, right? So
Yeah.
biggest manufacturers are stateside.
Good point.
Yeah, that's great. So, Paul, you hit on it being an art form, and I think that is 100% accurate, because my husband put a hole in the wall to move a plug for a TV, and then he tried to patch it, and it was terrible. Thankfully, we just had some work done here. So a larger contractor was already here, and I said, can you fix this while you're here? But I think, tell me a little bit about, how do you compete against those bigger ones? And then who are you hiring that does this? Because obviously someone like my husband can't just patch it himself. So hit on a couple of those pieces of where patch comes in.
Yeah, great question. It is a little bit of a skill, right? I mean, it's a teachable skill, but one that requires time and effort. So, most of the time that we teach our franchisees how, the what we call the choreography of the patch, and understanding drywall basics. And I would say like 90% of our franchisees are not doing a drywall repair. They do what we call the executive model. And what that means is that they're running the operation as like a manager, and they have a crew or a team of folks who are doing the work themselves. So the reason that it's important for the franchisee to go through training and to understand the basics is twofold. First of all, it's really going to help them understand how to price it and how to estimate the number of hours it's going to take for the drywall repair team to go in and perform the work that's necessary, which is absolutely critically important, because if you have technicians that are not efficient, that's where, it's your largest expense is labor. And so the more that you can price a job correctly and making sure your technicians are efficient, the higher your margins are on that. And the second fold too is, I highly recommend that our franchisees at least get into the field and do some drywall repair, because if the technician gets sick or leaves you for, $1 more an hour or whatever ends up being, you can step into the business without having much disruption. And I guess the ancillary benefit of that also helps in hiring, and find out, who really knows how to do drywall repair, and someone who's just kind of really just talking a talk but not able to walk the walk. So it helps you to filter that. And Kris, you have some experience in your local franchise. I'm assuming that helped you in evaluating some of your technicians. Is that correct?
Yeah, 100%. Like Paul said, I mean, we do want all of our franchise owners to be trained on how to actually do drywall repair, the texture, the paint matching. How does that all work, so they can speak intelligently to their customers and to their employees? Like Paul also said, most of our franchisees are not in the field. So we do have a great example, Joseph Gilliam, who's in Cleveland, Ohio, great franchisee of ours, sales and marketing background, not a handy guy. And he started as an owner operator, and he was an owner operator for over 2 years, and then transitioned to the executive, which is a great way to do it because you retain all the margin. There's no labor expense, right? So it's all in your pocket. But the downside is you can't scale. So our franchisees that are putting up really big numbers out of the drywall space that I think would shock a lot of people, they have technicians underneath them so that they can really scale. And as far as the hiring of the employees, this is a big benefit that we have. We're hiring from the trades, people that have 3 to 5 years, maybe even 10 years or more of experience. And a lot of them are 40 to 60 years old. have never heard of an IRA or a 401k. So they have to keep working, right? But they can't do 50 sheets or 100 sheets in a day and they're another cog on a wheel. When they come work for us at PatchMaster and us as owners, they become a big fish in a small pond. We treat them well, we pay them well, and it's a cushy job for them because it's not so difficult on their bodies. We've also had a lot of success. We have 2 technicians that are younger. So I'm not saying you have to hire 40 to 60-year-olds and that's all that works. We have technicians that are 25 and 35 in my personal business, which is really my wife's business. My wife runs the day to day because full-time effort, full-time result. And those employees, both of them have young families, right? People that are responsible, that are going to show up and not call you on Sunday night or Monday morning and say, oh, boss, I'm sick. No, you're hungover. Get to work, right? That's what you're avoiding. But the pool of these people are out there. They make really good quality employees.
Yeah. Kris, if I can follow up, we'll stick with you since you're a franchise owner. Talk to us about what it looked like starting your franchise on day one. Paul, you mentioned the executive model and your franchisees not being out there in the field. So how do I actually launch this and get it off the ground? Meaning, how many drywall specialists do I need on day one? How do I start getting customers? Eventually, what's the breakdown between, am I getting customers online from digital lead generation? How long does it take to start getting customers from referral sources like plumbers and electricians? Talk about that ramp up and what that looked like for you.
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is not just my rant, but also a lot of our franchisees that I'll be speaking to. Most of the franchisees, when they launch, you hire one technician, one person, one van. Once that person is booked out 3 to 4 weeks, it's going to start to make sense to evaluate maybe bringing on a part timer or maybe even another full time if you're having a really good growth trajectory. And we have seen franchisees at corporate, Kevin Gray, who's our executive business coach, and Paul will build out their financial through the financial insights tool so that they've got a future pro forma so that they can see what their targets are, and they'll well exceed what we set for them. So some of the franchisees just hit the ground running faster, and how they do that is referral partnerships. So most of the leads that we get initially comes from Google, SEO, PPC activities, web portals like Angie's and Thumbtack, social media. That's all managed by the franchisor. We have a team underneath Nicole, who's our CMO. Matt, Juan, and Kate all work with our CMO, and they manage all those things for us as franchisees at a local level. So the lead generation happens much quicker than I think most people realize, and their calendars start to fill up much quicker than most people realize. So the scalability starts to factor. And we've seen franchisees that are 4, 6, 7 months in that might have anywhere from 3 to 5 technicians. That doesn't happen for everybody. Some people have a slower launch, but a lot of the lead generation is coming from them building the website. We have a 24/7 answering center that won't give them a price or put them on your calendar to ensure the phone's always answered if we're busy. And then we follow up. So once the franchisees have gotten their feet wet, they've done some jobs, they've collected invoices, they've gotten really comfortable, they've started to get good reviews, then they can start to validate themselves and their business to our referral partners. So you don't want to start that necessarily on day one because you don't have any credibility yet, right? So after 90 days, after 120 days, whatever it takes, we start to leverage the other levers we can pull, which are plumbers, electricians, real estate agents, home inspectors, HVAC companies, property managers. We could go on and on. There's so many people that see a need or create a need for our service. Our franchisees that grow really big businesses execute that really well. The franchisees that are hindered in their growth is really just because they're relying on the Googleverse or digital marketing to generate leads. So the biggest difference, and we'll talk about the full-time effort, part-time effort. With our business, it's a direct result. You guys will get what you put into the business, and driving the community awareness, BNIs, Chamber of Commerce, master network groups, referral marketing will really help you level up and get to multiple technicians.
That's helpful. Thanks. So Paul, kind of tying off of what Kris just said, tell us a little bit about who you're looking for. Are you looking for somebody that's an executive model to begin with, or are you looking for someone to come in owner operator? What kind of characteristics make a good owner?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when we try and take a look at what the DNA is of a successful franchisee, I think that's probably the best way to look at it. The ideal candidate has sales background, right? That should be true of anyone that starts their own business, because at the end of the day, you need to have that funnel filled, and you need a lot of the efforts are going to be required upon you. So someone in sales, someone who has marketing experience, or someone who came from someone inside the trades, that would be, another a value add. The other thing is, sales market. Oh, business ownership too. It's every business is going to go through its struggles, and someone who's had experience coming in, from, had their own business, whether it was in, the same vertical or selling widgets, it doesn't matter. Business ownership is business ownership. You understand the needs and some of the pitfalls of business ownership. So I'd say that would be, one of the successful DNA prints that would make, those would be the DNA prints that would make someone successful on that. And grit. That is just so important. Mike, I love what Mike Tyson once said no one ever. But anyway, what Mike Tyson said once, I absolutely love, is like, everyone goes in and has a plan until they get hit in the face. And so that's absolutely true, because when you're a business owner, you're going to get hit often. And it's having that grit and and having your focus on the long-term vision, and having support structure will help you get through some of those challenges that every business owner faces, no matter what business you're in, and how well the plan that you have created. So, again, when it goes back to what we're looking for, is going to be those characteristics. Now, it's not to say that, we don't have people from other walks of life that are very successful, between librarians and, people coming out of white collar jobs and whatnot. But one of the things that we do see as being a common thread are those four things that I laid out earlier.
What about the semi-absentee piece? So somebody's coming in, they want to start it that way. Do they have to have that background? And then what does that look like? They have to have enough flexibility in their current day job? What are they putting in for hours?
Yeah, that's an important piece to discuss, and Kris touched on it before. Is that the problem with semi-absenteeism is that it's a part-time effort gets part-time result. This isn't our business and our model. It may work for others, but our business and our model, we're not a dry cleaner, not a dry cleaner. I'm sorry, a laundromat. Where they just become self-service on that. You need someone that constantly manages the business and grows the business. In fact, we recently did a study, and we did a cohort analysis broken down by a year in which that the franchisee opened. And then we separated that cohort into full-time and part-time, those who have, secondary jobs, other layers of income comparatively. Now, the first year, when we take a look at the trajectory, the first year goes up, up into the right in a band, but there's about, a 40% delta between the full-time franchisee and the part-time franchisee. But the big disparity really starts stepping into year 2, 3, 4, and 5, where you get out to year 5, it's almost a 400% delta between the part-time franchisee and a full-time franchisee. And so, a lot of times, I've shared this with Kris for the last 2.5, 3 years, we've really been shying away from anyone in a semi-absentee model, particularly coming out of COVID. Those are one of the lessons that we've learned, is that it's really hard to execute, because when things get tough, you're going to focus on your primary income source. And that's usually the W-2 employee, working a white collar job, trying to do this on the side. It just doesn't seem to pan out and work out that way. And we have, the data to support that. So the only time I would look at someone be semi-absentee would be an investor, and an investor would have a different set of criteria as far as liquidity, experience. They would need to have a manager already in place, have a business ownership experience. So we're really narrowing, you're really narrowing down that window as far as someone who can come in from from an investor standpoint.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Let me add a little bit to that. So what Paul referenced, I think, is really important. Also, what I just said, the first year, their growth is pretty similar, but what is lacking is the community involvement, getting referrals from other people, right? Google and web portals and social can only generate so much. So if you're just an order taker and you're not a business builder, your business isn't going to grow and scale to its full potential. And we do have some anomalies out there, right? If you look at the system as a whole, around 5% of our owners, Paul can correct me if I'm wrong because he's the data guy, but our owner operators, we might have 8% investors, and then the rest are going to be executives. So we are very strong into executive, which means that, and if you think about the difference between us and our competition, one key word here is professionalism, right? We're not using day laborers that are showing up in whatever they're wearing that day and coming with whatever equipment they have. They show up in uniforms, they wear the proper proper gear, but they also come in with dustless sanders and dustless saws in a wrapped vehicle, right? And when they work with our franchisees that are executive owners that have come from Salesforce or Boeing or wherever they've come from, librarian, we do have one guy that was a librarian for 20 years, as Paul mentioned. So all different walks of life that you can be successful. But if somebody's not paying attention to the business and actively trying to grow it, you just can't expect amazing things to happen, right? And that's the biggest difference between part-time and full-time.
And I think, Kris, just to expand on what he talked about before, is how we, our approach to the business is what separates us from, the masters from the boys, right? Is that we're showing up. Most of we strongly encourage all of our franchisees to have W-2 employees, not contractors, because the difference shows up in the work, because they're showing up in a branded in a branded van, in a branded shirt. So when someone knocks on the door, they know they're expecting PatchMaster, expecting someone to come in. They're not expecting some guy in jeans and a t-shirt and some raggedy pickup truck. That leaves no confidence, particularly, if you're home alone, if the customer's home alone, you don't know who the stranger is coming inside your house. So the fact that we can come in showing branded, that we have pride in our work, that we guarantee our work, is really a huge separator. And, and I know that there are some competing brands out there where they'll show up on the job to do the quote in branded material, but they're going to hire, some day laborer to come in and to perform the work. Where's your work quality? I mean, that's why we have such a really high customer review score, out there, and every single one of our customers get invited to provide feedback on the services, and our numbers are just off the charts. So you don't have to take my word for it. You can just go look anywhere, and you're going to see that our reviews are really stellar. And I think that comes in with the professionalism that Kris touched on earlier.
Yeah, and just so everybody, for you guys and everybody watching, we have about 200 locations, and our average review is 4.91. So it's something we're very proud of.
Yeah, that's great.
Very nice. Well, at this point in the podcast, we're going to pivot, guys, and I'm excited because between the two of you, you have a lot of franchise experience, and we're going to hope a lot of franchise wisdom. We'll see. So we want to turn to our rapid fire questions. So these are two questions that are not specific to PatchMaster. These are just general franchising questions for those that are either looking at franchising or in franchising. So the first question, and Paul, we'll start with you, and then Kris, I want you to answer the same question. What's one piece of advice you'd give somebody who's seriously considering buying a franchise and entering business ownership for the first time?
I would say just business ownership, recognize that this isn't a hobby. You're making an investment, right? You're spending $100,000+ likely in buying a franchise, and it's really hard. That money can go away in an instant if you're not judicious and focusing on your profit margins and focusing on your business. And, my background is in financial planning. So I always feel like I have a fiduciary responsibility when a franchisee comes on board, and I tell them, making sure that you have the commitment, the time that it takes to be a business owner. A business owner comes with a lot of perks, but also comes with a lot of pain in the sense of, hours that are worked, and sometimes it's weekends, sometimes it's nights, but, other times you get to reap the rewards. So, treat this as a full-time business, not as a hobby. Make sure that you get the most out of your investment is by focusing your efforts into that business. That to me is especially in the early years, the first 2 years of business are crucial. So work like you've like no one else, so you can live like no one else.
Thank you. Kris, what about you?
That's great. So as a first time, which is the question, investor into a franchise opportunity, there's a lot of data out there. Google can get you some places. I do think working with people like yourself at The Perfect Franchise can really help guide them in the right direction. So my advice is to work with someone like you guys at TPF and to truly follow the process. Our item 19 today doesn't tell the full story, right? So if you don't go through this entire process and evaluate the business, and what I strongly recommend for everybody that's listening is validate, talk to the franchisees, see if you can really unpack what this business looks like. And I wish I could tell people how quickly you can make money in PatchMaster, but I can't legally, right? So validation will tell people that. This is also, with PatchMaster specifically, turning it back, this is an investment where you're not betting the farm, right? Don't bet the farm on your very first franchise that you get into. pick something, whether it's PatchMaster or something, maybe even home service related, or that has a lower barrier of entry, that's not so expensive. Get your feet wet, vet out the brand properly, make sure that they're going to provide support, because not all franchises are created equally, and something that we do very, very well. But follow the process and validate. Just make sure to talk to at least a handful of franchisees, if not more, in all different areas, because when you're buying a business, this in most cases, this isn't a CD, set it and forget it, right? This is, you are going to get what you put in. And if you have always been a top operator and a top performer, then you're probably going to be like our top operators and top performers. So you should talk to some of them, but you should also talk to people underneath, and you'll recognize why you may not be in the middle or at the bottom of this opportunity, right? So that's my biggest piece of advice.
Yeah, good advice. Good. Okay, so now we're going to ask for one piece of advice for somebody who has taken the plunge. They bought a franchise, any kind of franchise, and they're in their first year. We know what a roller coaster that first year is. It's so exhilarating when we make the decision to leap and buy the franchise. We don't realize the hard work hasn't even started yet. It's that first year. So what's one piece of advice, Paul, that you'd give somebody to help them get through that first year?
Can I give two?
Yeah, go for it.
It's both are really critically important. First thing is, don't be reliant on Google. Google is changing. AI is really changing the landscape. So it becomes really, really difficult for folks to rely heavily on Google. So, as Kris talked about before, living inside your market, being, getting people to know you, that you're the drywall guy or you're the drywall girl. Just be known in your market, and develop that, and don't be so reliant. That's why we take that off their plates. We have, internally, I'm sorry, but a little plug, but we have a marketing piece and a marketing arm where we manage the Google ads and all the digital marketing campaign, our franchisees. So it's one less thing that they have to do, so they can go out and focus and build those referral business. And the second piece, and this is true of every business, know your numbers, data-driven decisions, get inside in QuickBooks, making sure you have accurate data, knowing what your profit margins are, understanding what your cost of goods sold are. You're, again, as I mentioned before, this is not a hobby. You're in it to make money. So making sure that you have your pro forma, your forecast, your goals, comparing your actuals against your forecast, and then making changes, accordingly. People who don't know their numbers don't know their business, and so I think those are probably the two best pieces of advice I can give any business owner, whether a franchise or not. Those are the two key things that every business owner needs to know.
Excellent. Kris, what about you?
Mine's very simple, and it's follow the process, right? The franchisor spent a lot of time, energy, and money to build this out, and they have more than likely tried whatever you're thinking. So we ask at PatchMaster, give it 12 months. That first year, just follow our process for 12 months, and then start to innovate. As a franchisee, you are still an entrepreneur, right? You just have training wheels and a lot of support and people to bounce ideas off of, and those conversations, reaching out to your franchisor. I've seen so many franchisees that buy a franchise and they just have so much pride. They're like, well, I didn't want to bug you or reach out for this or that, or my numbers aren't as good as I thought they would be. Well, that's why you bought a franchise, right? You have all of these people here that have different skills and abilities that you may lack. So us together, we create a really good partnership, and our franchisee success is our success. So that's why we are franchisee first at this business. And if you follow the process with my oil change franchise or my PatchMaster franchise, there was ideas with the oil change business that I was like, oh, we should do this or that. I pinged them up and they shot it right back down and said, this is why it won't work, right? So follow the process, stay tried and true it, put in the work, and the results will be there.
That's great. Well, thank you both so much for coming on, Paul and Kris. I really appreciate it. And I think being able to learn about Patch a little bit more, and even though Paul was really excited about drywall, it is a boring business, and we love boring businesses at TPF. We always say boring businesses are not boring. They make money. It's sort of that passion of getting into something, building something, really being involved. And I think you've both hit a lot on what it takes to truly be successful in a lot of these home services, and focusing more on the B2B piece, being out in the community, really getting your name out there, and the social aspect of it. And in an area that's really sort of recession resistant. It's AI proof. So I think that's really great. So thank you both for coming on today. If you're thinking about franchising, remember that while there's no one size fits all, the perfect franchise for you is definitely out there. To explore your options, please visit theperfectfranchise.com and click on Let's Talk to schedule a call with one of the consultants on the Perfect Franchise team. We look forward to connecting with you again on the next episode.